Here are your hosts, Kyle Fellows and Andrew Mertig. This is the Draft Fellows Podcast.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to episode 4 of the Draft Fellows Podcast. Make sure to follow the Draft Fellows channel on YouTube, or you can check out the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. Today is the second part of our NFC East draft review. If you want to check out the first 3 episodes of the series to hear about the AFC East, or episode 3 where the Cowboys and Giants draft classes were broken down, you can follow the channel or audio podcast. Check out that previous episode. But that is Kyle Fellows. I pointed the wrong way. I'm Andrew Mertig. Welcome back to the Draft Fellows Podcast. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing really, really well. I am super excited to wrap up the NFC East. We got some really fun. These are some fun draft classes. It's going to be really interesting to dive in. I have so many questions. I'm just excited to hear your perspective on a few of the players that went to these teams in the NFC East.
Yeah, so let's not wait. Let's jump right into it.
Let's do it.
One of my favorite draft classes around the league, the Philadelphia Eagles. In the first round at pick 22, they take cornerback Quinyon Mitchell, the first corner off the board from Toledo. In the second round, they jump back in and get Cooper DeJean, the defensive back from Iowa. In the third round, they take Jalix Hunt, the edge from Houston Christian. In the fourth round, they get one of my favorites, running back Will Shipley from Clemson. 3 fifth-round picks, wide receiver Aeneas Smith, linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr., guard Trevor Keegan, I can say words. And then 2 in the 6th round, wide receiver / massive player Johnny Wilson, and then interior offensive lineman Dylan McMahon. So who you like here?
Oh, man. if we have Eagles fan followers, I don't hate the Eagles. But I hate that I love the Eagles draft class so much. Because it does seem like every year they come away with a really good haul of players. And it happened again this year, like Quinyon Mitchell. It's ridiculous that Quinyon Mitchell fell to 22. It's ridiculous that Terrion Arnold fell to 24. We thought both of those guys were going to go in that like 12 to 17 range. And so that they were able to gobble up Quinyon Mitchell at 22 is fantastic. What a player. I mean, he's a player that I think is going to have a little bit of growing to do because of the up of tempo and the competition that he's going to face in the NFL. Also, the difference between the way he'll play press and the way that he'll play off in the NFL is going to, I think, be a challenge for him. But he did it at the Senior Bowl, and it didn't look hard for him. So I think he's a player that's going to transition pretty seamlessly to the league. And, I mean, you got to start there. Where was Quinyon Mitchell on your board, Andrew? How high did you have him?
I believe he was overall 12.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Overall 9.
9.
So, yeah.
Sheesh.
I thought the, potential matchup of him and the Falcons at 8 was a very realistic possibility. And there were tons of teams in the teens, like, Jacksonville Jaguars, just to mention one, that I thought for sure are going to scoop up one of the corners if they fall to them. I did not think that either Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold would fall all the way to 22. I thought maybe the Eagles would have to trade up if they wanted to get one of them, but they didn't. They stay pat, and they get a really, really fantastic prospect in Mitchell. And then they jump back in the second round. They get Cooper DeJean. And so depending on how the Eagles want to play defense, they can – maybe play DeJean as a cover 3 corner. Maybe they can try to transition to safety. Maybe they can just use him as a big slot corner. There's so many different things that you can do with him because of his really tremendous athleticism. And I think the reason why he fell to 40 was probably there were a lot of NFL teams that didn't want to change what they do to incorporate the kind of unique athlete that DeJean is.
Frustrating because he is a good player, and again fell right into 40. Nobody thought that 40 was possible for Cooper DeJean, and I think you said it, like the interesting conundrum of where do you play him, how do you maximize him. I graded him as a safety and felt like he was easily a first round value as a safety because I did think that there was a little bit of stiffness to his game. I felt if you let him just play forward, let him play as a safety, let him see it all in front of him, like you kind of eliminate all the concerns, and then you're left with there's never a flawless prospect, but kind of like there's nothing left to really critique here if you eliminate that part of his game. The instincts, the ball hawking, it's all there. And so, again, just fell right to the Eagles, get a great player who's probably going to start in some creative fashion at, nickel safety, some kind of hybrid for a long time for this team.
Yeah, I want to talk about Will Shipley, right? Because I'm selfish and I like to talk about the players that I was really high on. Shipley at one point was the number 1 running back in the country and then chose Clemson. He comes in kind of mixed results in college, but you can see the potential. He is a phenomenal athlete, really, really great at catching the ball. I thought that was an elite trait, and that's why I had him rated so high. Like, is he the best runner in between the tackles in this draft class? No, but he did have one thing that I think made him stand apart. And we think Saquon Barkley is going to get, 90% of the work but health is always going to be an issue with a running back who's nearing their late 20s. I think, the Eagles may take a look at Barkley's historical usage and say we need to sort of pace him throughout the season. So who's going to be the backup running back? And the Eagles have gone through some transition in their backfield this offseason. And I think Shipley has an opportunity to be a really nice rotational back. And if Barkley does need to miss some time, I think Shipley could be pretty darn good, given that he's always going to face a little bit lighter box than you think based on the threat of run that Jalen Hurts presents to the defense.
Shipley was your RB4, right? Is that like in that range, right?
Man, you're asking me all sorts of
questions
that I should know the answer to.
I know it was high. So I remember being
2.
Holy cow, man.
Yeah, so I had Trey Benson and Will Shipley.
Will Shipley, number 2. So he's my RB10. But it's funny, like a lot of the what an idiot. Just kidding. No, so I see a lot of the same things that you do as far as like the unique trait as receiving back, that kind of a player that can come in and impact the game in those kinds of ways. I just valued that in a different way. And so for me, I knocked him down, but some durability concerns, but love him as a role player. And I think what he does really well. And again, falls into a place where Philadelphia is going to be able to plug him in and use him, especially if he doesn't have to be the bell cow, right? Like he can come in and he can do those kinds of things. So super interesting. Jalix Hunt is a super interesting player. It's interesting how badly Philadelphia wanted him in the 3rd round. I felt like was a reach for him a little bit, but intriguing player. I dug into this edge class really, really heavily. He was a player I could not find film on. I found like just enough to like put a really lousy grade on him, as far as like not lousy, like low, but like just like felt really incomplete. I didn't see enough. And so I turned in my top 20 grades for edge players. And then I fell into like 2 or 3 more games of his film. I think he probably would have been like edge 15, 16 for me if I had gotten to that a little bit earlier. But super interesting. He's a safety convert. He started at Cornell and got too big. He just like kept growing. And so they moved him to edge. And then of course ends up going over to Houston Christian, which is the reason we couldn't find film on the guy. So super high ceiling, a lot of developmental upside, really, really good interview, loves the game, and it's just going to be a lot of fun to coach. So Jalix Hunt, I wouldn't take him in the 3rd round, but it's really, really easy to see why a team would fall in love and wants to try to tap into that untapped potential.
Yeah, I didn't have a grade on Hunt for many of the same reasons. It was hard to find tape, and the stuff I saw, it's like, okay, well, of course he's an high-level athlete going against, people that are likely walk-ons or, D2, D3 caliber players. So of course he's going to dominate them, but I think there was enough in the all-star circuit that people saw that were like, maybe this guy can make the transition. And for the Eagles, who have, this great track record of developing edge players, I think that's a really fun ball of clay to throw out there. Just want to quickly go over these last 4 picks. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., really fun story because of his dad playing in Philly. I'm super underwhelmed by the prospect. He's small. He's not fast. They already have that player, Nakobe Dean. Don't get it.
Yeah. Some people have highlighted he did have an ongoing hamstring issue throughout 2023. So that's my only asterisk because the exact same thoughts. I was like kind of underwhelmed, not super excited, but maybe there's more to this player than what we saw on film.
Yeah, I think with Trevor Keegan and Dylan McMahon, the interior offensive lineman, I could see either one of those, or maybe both, being really, really serviceable backups who could potentially develop in the starters. I like those kind of late round picks often get me more excited than the Jeremiah Trotter Juniors. And then Johnny Wilson in the 6th round, like I have no idea what to do with him. He's like 6'7", 240. Is he Kelvin Benjamin? I don't know. Could you convert him to tight end? I don't know. Is he a guy that you just throw in there in the red zone?
Yeah.
Maybe. Is he does he develop into like an Alan Lazard kind of blocking wide receiver? Maybe that too. I don't know. But in the 6th round, like, why not? He is a player we just don't have a comp for.
Yeah. Big player. They said, someone asked him, like, do you view him as a tight end? They're like, no, he's a receiver. So I don't know. It's hard to have that clear of a definition that he's not going to be that because of his frame. So it'll be fascinating to see how Philly uses him for sure.
But like Alan Lazard, Ben Skoranek, those are not tight ends.
Yeah.
Skoranek plays fullback sometimes, but like, could he be that level of blocker where you can line him up wide? He's technically a wide receiver, but you're going to motion him down into the line and then he can kick out blocks. I don't know. I think that's interesting as a 6th round pick. But let's move over to the Washington Commanders. And of course, their draft is going to start and end with pick 2 overall, Jaden Daniels, the quarterback out of LSU. In the 2nd, they had 3 picks. Johnny Newton, the defensive lineman from Illinois, Mike Sanderstill, the corner from Michigan, and then tight end Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. 2 more 3rd rounders, Brandon Coleman, the offensive lineman from TCU, and then Luke McCaffrey, the wide receiver from Rice. And then they had 3 day 3 picks. We don't necessarily need to go through those.
Let's talk with, you're right. This is a brand new era of football with the Washington Commanders. They're trying to change the culture there, and they're starting with a quarterback, right? Like, so they're dropping in Jaden Daniels, who has made his own path, right? Like, started off in a place where he wasn't on this trajectory to be a high pick, and then at LSU turns everything around, becomes, by all accounts, leader on the football field, leader off the football field, and drop dimes to some really talented wide receivers there for a solid season and put up incredible numbers. So it seems like this is what they've put all their eggs in this basket, that Jaden Daniels is going to be that dynamic leader with his arm, but also with his legs. And I think that that's something that they certainly found intriguing when they went to make the selection.
Yeah, I loved Jaden Daniels. You go back and watch his Arizona State tape, and it's like a completely unrecognizable player.
Yeah.
And to see that development at LSU is really, really fascinating. And I think that gives you a lot of hope that he is somebody who's just going to continue to get better and learn and develop. The frame scares you, as it does many modern day quarterbacks, because he's really thin. I think he's going to need to do a really good job of taking care of the ball and taking care of his body. He cannot take hits. Like, I know he's a huge play waiting to happen, but we saw what happened to Anthony Richardson. And I feel like Anthony Richardson had a little bit more of a pro-ready body, but like, you just can't take hits from these NFL caliber defensive players often, right? It doesn't matter who you are. Even Cam Newton eventually broke down. So, for Daniels, I think watch a lot of Lamar Jackson tape, see how he is taking care of himself, learn that it's okay to give up on a drive and throw the ball away instead of trying to make a heroic play on 3rd down. But he has all of the skills there. And I think I am a little bit nervous of Cliff Kingsbury because I think that's really good for fantasy Jaden Daniels and maybe not so much for NFL quarterback Jaden Daniels. But I think Kingsbury is going to give him a lot of opportunities. And maybe Kingsbury has learned from some of his failures as well. So I think this is a super, super fun opportunity for him. And this Washington skills unit, like skill player unit, is better than we're giving it credit for. I think, Terry McLaurin is, of course, as steady as they come. And I think Jahan Dotson is bound to have a bounce back season this year. I really do.
Yeah, and we'll talk about a few more of the guys that they added in this draft that will fill out some of those offensive weapons for Jaden Daniels. I do think it's fascinating that this is a player in Jaden Daniels who probably takes a step back, even though Washington's a good, they have a lot of talent on that offense. He takes a step back from Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Like, that's not that often that happens where you take a step back going into your NFL receiving room. So that'll be an adjustment for him a little bit there. And of course, I'm sure those players elevated him as well, but excited to see his development, and the trajectory is certainly there for him to be a very dynamic player for the Commanders for a long time. Johnny Newton is a player that I loved in the mid-20s of the first round. I think his injury really probably put him here at 36. I couldn't believe when picks started coming off the board in the second round that he wasn't like the first or second one. Like, he's a very talented player. That injury probably got in the way. Mike Sanderstill is a player who is a leader for the Michigan Wolverines, led by example, playmaker, can play in the slot, and is going to be a piece of this culture change that they want in Washington. That was part of that selection as well. Ben Sinnott, Andrew, is a player that a lot of people really like, and I think he went higher than some people thought that tight ends maybe would come off the board in this class. But the buzz around him had him going pretty early. Where did you see Ben Sinnott? Because I watched him, but I did not put a firm grade on him.
Yeah, so it is funny. The Senator ends up in DC. That's pretty good.
Pretty awesome.
I had him at 107 overall, so
okay.
Not in that category. But based on the buzz that we were hearing pre-draft, I figured he was going to go at the latest third round. And so I think, if you really love that style, and it makes sense, right? Cliff Kingsbury is going to want to run on the edges a lot, and to have a tight end who can really seal that edge for you is going to be very, very valuable. I think Sinnott has the opportunity to make a George Kittle-like impact during his career. Does that mean he's going to? I don't know. Tight ends develop so weirdly.
Yes.
Like, it is so difficult to predict who's going to be impact tight end. Because, I would have thought OJ Howard was going to be like one of those top 5 tight ends in the league for his whole career, because he could block. He was a crazy athlete. He just never developed. Yep. And so who knows? But at the end of the day, give me a tight end who cares so much like Sinnott does, because I know his floor is a really, really good blocking tight end. So he's always going to be on the field.
Yep.
And if he never quite reaches his potential in the passing game, it's still not a terrible pick, right? You still got a pretty good asset in what Sinnott is going to provide to this offense. But if he does reach his potential as a block and release tight end, then, watch out. He'd be a really, really, really big factor in this Washington offense going forward.
And he's going to have a chance right away to connect with fellow rookie Jaden Daniels. So there's, potential to build chemistry right out of the gate. And that a tight end is quarterback's best friend. So that could be a really good connection for those guys. Another guy that has that same opportunity is Luke McCaffrey, coming in from Rice. Obviously, we know the McCaffrey name well. He wanted to be a quarterback really, really bad, and it just didn't work out. So he's kind of raw-ish as a wide receiver in experience, but at the same time, he's kind of he's pretty nuanced as a route runner, and he's a pretty good athlete. So there's a lot of reason why Jahan Dotson is really the only player standing in his way from being a potential starter. And I think he's going to be on the field potentially in 3 wide receiver sets pretty early. So if there's a rookie wide receiver who was drafted, beyond the first couple of rounds, who might walk into a place where he can start in his rookie year, I think it could be Luke McCaffrey. So he's going to be a fun one to watch, obviously, with the family connections. Everyone will be talking about it. But they might have gotten another great player there at the end of the third round.
Yeah, McCaffrey was my wide receiver 16.
Okay.
But he was my 64th overall player. So that tells you what I thought about this wide receiver class.
Yes.
But yeah, I think he can be a really, really good. I think you can put him in the slot and he'll be fine. And I think Washington's going to run a lot of 3 wide receivers anyways. So if you want to put one of Dotson or McLaurin in the slot and have McCaffrey on the outside, that's cool too. But I think they're going to run 3 wide receivers so much that McCaffrey's basically going to be a de facto starter on this team. And I think we could see some really fun stuff with this group. I think they've done a good job. I think Brandon Coleman is a nice addition to this offensive line rotation. I think you might be able to kick him outside and play tackle a little bit, but probably a much more natural guard. And so I thought, Washington, yes, they had a ton of ammunition, and that makes things a lot easier when you're drafting. But I thought they did really well with the picks that they had and took opportunity to find a potentially impactful player at each one of those.
Absolutely agree. And I mean, they might have gotten another starter. You mentioned the tackle guard flexibility, but if you can get a starter in the third round at guard, like that's a home run. I think Brandon Coleman certainly has that potential, but it'll be really fascinating to watch this team this year because they, obviously they have the new signal caller. Jaden Daniels is going to have the reins to this offense, but they made a concerted effort to really flip this team, bring in veteran presence players to lead. Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler, and then they dropped in this rookie class, which has, as you mentioned, an insane amount of picks. They had an insane amount of ammunition. So it's going to be really interesting to watch them, hit the ground running and see how early these guys get to play and if they really can change things up there in Washington.
Absolutely. But that'll take care of our review of the NFC East.
And we will be back very soon with episode 5. So stick with us. Thanks for joining us for this episode. Make sure you subscribe, like the show. We'll be covering every division in football over the next couple weeks, from the draft room to the gridiron. The Draft Fellows have you covered. So until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.